We are live. My name is Jared Sparr, and I want to welcome everyone for joining us, and thank you for joining us. I'm the founding member of the Restaurant Business Advisors Group, and this is the module on layout and design. Um, I've noticed just myself, from my experience, that a lot of business owners, a lot of new restaurant owners, try and get into the business fairly inexpensively and try and do a lot of things on their own. And the reality is, there's a ton of knowledge out there that I know knowledge costs money if you hire someone, but typically the cost of that knowledge will more than pay for itself because if you hire someone to help you with these types of things, they can increase the number of patrons that you can fit inside your restaurant. They can increase how quickly you can serve those customers. They can increase the turnaround and even the efficiency of your staff. Not to mention, they can help you avoid issues as far as requirements with like the health department. So today we're going to talk about that and some of the common mistakes that new restaurant owners make and how you can avoid them. And just before we start, just wanted to say that do you know 9,000 restaurants every year fail in their first year of business? And that's a true statistic. We got them from American Express, and it's kind of a scary number. We know that for sure. And what we did was we put together the Restaurant Business Advisors Group to help our customers get through their first year of business and succeed against all the odds. You can get more information on us at restaurantbusinessadvisors.com, where we have training videos and insider information on how to succeed in your new year or your first year in business. Um, we have subjects in those videos with everything from financing to how to choose a contractor to how to select a POS system that's right for your business, and basically everything you need to succeed in business in your first year. And let's see here. My name again is Jared Sparr. I'll be your presenter. And my specialty is cash flow. I'm a cash flow consultant, and my tagline is I'm a life preserver for your cash flow. And our guest today is Matt Bedrick. And Matt, did I say your last name right?
That is correct. Yes.
Yay! Matt's from the Bandrek Design Group, and he is also a representative with C&T Design and Equipment Company. And his information is up on the screen. Matt, can you tell me a little bit more about how you got started in the business, your background, and your affiliation with C&T?
Well, thank you, Jared. Yes, my background started with just I was always into design. Growing up, my first job, real job, was with a developer. Um, you know, Putting buildings together. From there, I moved on to a food service equipment company. It wasn't C&T Design at that time. We It was my first introduction into a whole back of the house kind of operation. And I did that back in 1993. I started that, so it's been about 20 years in the business now.
Wow.
So that was my first into really understanding how everything in the kitchen works, and then how that flows to the front. Um, my affiliation with C&T was the people that I worked with at that previous firm decided to kind of branch out and do more design-based work. And I went along with them, and that's when we started the C&T Troy branch back in 1998. So we've been doing that here for 15 years now. So that's the background. I also, during that time, went to school, college, did architecture, went through the whole program, and I now have been in my own business doing architecture work for um, about 13 years now. So that's my background, design based. Yes,
So you kind of bridge the gap between both as far as design and layout and then also equipment. Is that correct?
yes, that's correct.
All right, perfect. So you've got a lot of history, more than I thought. Um, and the next slide here is kind of like the where do we start? And I know that I think new owners are just so scattered because there's so many things to consider and they want to know what sequence to do things in. And I think what I've noticed from my experience with working with new restaurant owners is getting a professional involved from the very beginning because that will help save you not only time but also a lot of money down the line. So, kind of tell me a little bit, where's the best place to get started for a new restaurant owner?
Well, absolutely. The first step they should make is to contact a design professional. If they're doing a restaurant, it should be a food service design consultant. If they're working with an architect, I know that's sometimes the starting place. they'll need to find an architect that understands restaurants. But there's also this whole other entity that is often overlooked, which is the food service design. That's someone who's going to design the kitchen, design the bar areas, the service stations, somebody who can take you through that process. The architect will normally handle, the building layout, bathrooms and seating area and how the bar is going to work and the entrance. But they typically don't deal with how the kitchen works. They may assign a space for the kitchen, but they don't really understand how that space functions. So getting a food service design consultant involved real early on is really important because you can, obviously understand what your specific needs of your restaurant are based on your menu. You can understand what that space needs based on your menu. How big does the kitchen need to be? It is, I mean, I've seen this time and time again when I deal with architects who come in and bring a project to us that they've always undersized the space for the kitchen. Um, so it's really important early on to understand what's all involved, what's included, and the food service consultant is kind of the first person to take you through that process.
Okay. And one of the notes that we had before we were talking was just the cost of getting started. Like a ventilation hood, you noted that was like $300,000. And
Well,
yeah, go ahead
the
and tell me more
costs
about that.
are absolutely the costs are um, well. We've done so many of these of the restaurant projects where we kind of get a sense of what new equipment will cost for a specific size restaurant and understanding in our relationship with the architect or contractor as the process moves forward that we under all kind of get a sense of where the build out costs are. So generally what you'll spend on your new food service equipment for, let's say, a 120 seat restaurant to 200 seat restaurant, new equipment will cost probably about $120,000. Um, the build out specifically for all that equipment and millwork and seats and stuff is usually going to be about that cost as well. That doesn't include like the entire building. So let's just kind of look, step back. If that's kind of in the framework of a tenant improvement project where there's already a building shell and you're coming in and putting non-load bearing walls and you're just kind of dividing the space. You've already kind of got the building shell in order. So if you're looking at a 120 seat restaurant, $120,000 for equipment, close to 120,000 for the build out. There's also going to be obviously the cost of millwork depending on what your finishes are. Millwork being cabinets, seats, booths, bars, anything that will need to be built that's not kind of hard construction like floors, walls, ceilings, that kind of
This
stuff.
is a lot to take into account for
A
sure.
lot to take into account. Yes. Yep.
Well, one of the questions I think that often comes up is how, if I'm a new restaurant owner, how would I go about choosing the right consultant to work with? And tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. Well, I mean, there's lots of places to start, especially with the internet nowadays. There's a lot of research you can do into different food service companies. What they'll provide, what they don't provide. Some of them don't do architecture, and that's where I kind of differ in that I can provide that service. It doesn't have to be a combined service, but I can do each of them separately. But no, internet's a great place to start. There's also industry magazines like the Food Service Equipment magazine. I think it's called FSE magazine. There's all the food service industries, NAFM, the Michigan Restaurant Association, the National Restaurant Association. They'll have guidelines of who provides equipment, who does consultations. So I mean, that's a really good source. And plus, you probably want to work locally. So there's a lot of areas that will allow you to, find somebody locally to work with. And then, each of them typically have websites and identify what they do. And it's also good just to call them and talk to the person and ask what, if it's unclear, you can ask them anything you need to. What you provide, what you need from the client to work on the project, so there's you can ask all these questions to people, and they're really open with you, and because obviously they want to work with you and do a good design for you. So I think it's good to have that relationship too. You got to be able to talk to somebody. You can't just, even though there's the internet, you really need to kind of talk to somebody. So once you kind of narrow it down, then you can pick up the phone and talk to somebody or email them, and they can email back. So that's kind of the where you can start in finding the right person for you.
And in one of the other interviews that we did was for software developers or restaurant software, and I found it very interesting as far as what our consultant said in that case is, you know, don't just ask for references, but actually follow up. Meet with that owner and see how that experience was, and look at that company on social media and actually see what they've been doing, because a lot of times you can find out a lot of information through that a lot quicker than on someone's website. So it's always good to do your due diligence.
Yep. Plus, I mean, it's always important too to follow up on the restaurants that these people have done too, and if they're still in business, then they did something right, and so that's good. It's not just there's this the stat that you had 9,000 businesses. I understand it. A lot of it has to do with proper business management of restaurants, but then there's a lot that has to do with, was it properly designed, and does that design turn into efficiency for the project? So it's not costing you money; it's actually saving you.
Exactly. That's the whole goal.
Yep.
Um, so you had said that you're both an architect and a food service consultant, so it's kind of like the two for one there. And I
Right.
think, yeah, with that, you've got a lot more knowledge that you can bring to the table than the traditional, one or the other. Um, Kind of walk me through exactly what a food service consultant does, because I think most people don't understand that part of it.
Yes, the food service consultant will, from the client's menu, obviously the client will have to develop a menu of what they want to serve. Um, from that menu, they will determine what equipment is needed to make that menu, how much of that equipment is needed, um, how much storage is required based on the seating capacity and based on the menu. Obviously, um, different menus carry different weights in terms of what the bulk amount of food that they'll create. For example, fast food restaurants, turn stuff over a lot quicker than a sit-down restaurant. But it's also a sit-down restaurant that just does breakfast and lunch is going to be something that is different from somebody who does something breakfast, lunch, dinner, or lunch and dinner. They have higher quantities of food. So, food service consultant will take all those factors into consideration and then properly lay out the space, design the space so that it's efficient. It works for um, flow between from delivery to prep to storage to cooking to expediting, where that's kind of the behind where the behind the house meets the front of the house. The expediting being where people are picking up food and taking it out to the customers. So we'll manage that flow efficiently so that people aren't crossing paths, they're not in their way, in each other's way, and because when you're inefficient in that manner, it really affects more than just your staff. It's your ability to get the food out, and it's your ability to get dishes back into the dish room and get them cleaned up. So you want a really good flow. So we
Exactly.
design the flow, we design the operation of how some of that works in terms of how things move down a cook line, how they move down a chef's line. We'll design how the bar works. Obviously there's a pickup area for the wait staff to get orders out to the customers. Plus, there's also people who would sit at a bar. So there's got to be a specific function and tasks set up so that you're not being inefficient with your flow. So we design the flow based on the menu, based on the size, and then also we put a budget to this, which I think is really important because you have to know what the stuff's going to cost. So
Yeah.
that's the the process of what the food service design consultant will do.
I thought what you guys did was kind of neat too, in that you provide like very specific drawings based on what you kind of just outlined there as far as flow goes. So
Oh,
each
absolutely.
machine kind of goes in the right area, and you kind of specified even like down to where the utilities are located. And I think that's good for quoting, to get ideas on pricing, but also I think it's really good for how you guys can help someone get through that mysterious health department and all the local, department approvals. So.
Absolutely correct. That is another part that the food service consultant does. Based on the initial design, work through that whole workflow, and then they put together documents that can be submitted to the health department. They're very specific into each piece of equipment, where that utility for that specific piece of equipment will be, and then what that utility draw is. This same information, a package of information that a food service design consultant put together, that piece of information can be submitted to the health department for their review and approval, is also the same packet that can be sent back to the architect, so they can pass it on to their engineers and then engineer each of the connections to where they need to be into the overall electrical system, mechanical system, HVAC, plumbing, sewer. So it's really that kind of linkage between the two. Um,
And
and
that,
dealing with somebody like myself who does the whole package, then you've got one last step to coordinate.
I'm
So
going
I
to
already got it
interrupt you really quick.
coordinated. I've already
Can
dealt
you
with my engineers.
talk a
So
little bit louder? Because I'm having a tough time hearing you.
sure, no problem.
All right. So, yeah. All
Increase my
right.
volume here a little bit. Hopefully it
That's
helps
better.
out.
Yeah, it
Okay.
was good at the beginning. It kind of went down that a little bit. Um, okay. So, next slide is, and we talked about how you choose or what you want to ask. Um, you know that a food service professional does, a lot of different types of work. Um, and I think that you gave us a little bit of an idea of how you choose between one and the other. How does a food service professional interact with things like the contractors and the subcontractors?
It depends on the process for the project delivery. If the client has already selected a contractor, um, the food service design consultant will work with them. That usually the contractor will use the documents we produce to put things where they need to be. Um, we're also always in communication with the architect, the client, the contractor, um, if not, and obviously the health department as well, because generally when the health department does their review, they send the review comments back to the client, um, the architect, the food service consultant, and the contractor. Those are four people that are required to be on that submittal for the health department. So they'll all get the reviews back in, but it's really if there's any changes that need to be made, it's the design consultant that needs to um,
Kind of leads
fix those
that.
changes and then get it in line with what needs to be done on site.
Okay.
We'll also be there for we'll check, much like an architect would do. They would walk through the building and make sure things are built per plan. The food service design consultant will do that as well, just to double check and make sure utilities are in the correct place. And then you know we also do um, installation service for all the equipment that would be provided by the food service equipment supplier. We install it so that we're putting the stuff in place. We're caulking edges. We're putting everything where it needs to be, um, and we're there during the health department inspection. So once everything's installed and everything's operational, um, the client will have the health department come in and do an inspection. We're there during the inspection so that we can remedy any situation that needs to be handled at that time.
Yeah, which that makes a big difference because you don't want to have delays with that.
Absolutely, they're hard to get on. They're hard to get a review in. They're hard to um, assign a time to meet, and so you kind of have to be there and be ready to make changes if you need to.
Okay. So the next big question is the process, and kind of we talked about when to get you involved, which is pretty much right from the start. Walk me through kind of step by step, what the process is as far as things go. I know you said just first start by formulating the menu and then kind of
Yeah,
going from there. So.
yeah, and the client can formulate that menu either on their own or with a chef. A lot of times we work with a client who has already um, hired a chef, so they determine their menu. Obviously, you work with somebody like us as a food service design consultant. You also obviously you have to have a space, so you have to have an architect to start that process. Um, obviously the menu is going to drive everything, menu and size of your building, um, and budget, obviously. So those driving factors are really what's going to start this process. So you start with the food service design consultant, come up with a plan that works for the kitchen and bar and kind of general seating area. Work with the architect to, if things in the kitchen need to move, then you kind of bounce ideas off each other. Um, so you come up with once that plan has been formulated, then and it gets the approval of the client, based on it meeting the budget at that point. Then you continue with the um, what's called the food service rough and drawings, which is we've talked before about the specific electrical, plumbing, mechanical drawings that the food service people will put together. Um, that information gets sent to architect, who in turn sends it to his engineers to engineer the whole project. Um, then during that process of the food service design, the architecture is continuing. So they're developing the exterior or interior of the space, they're picking finishes, getting their documents wrapped up. Um, so health department is a separate submittal from building department, so it doesn't hurt to get the health department submittal process going. In some municipalities, it takes up to 5 weeks to get a health department approval of the plans. And I know sometimes some municipalities take that long in the plan review for architecture as well. So there's a lot of weeks of time that can easily overlap if they're sent in at the same time. But it really depends on the municipality. Um, some can have it done within a week in terms of a health department plan review, which is awesome because it allows everything else to continue forward. Um, you know, and during this process of the health department plan review process, when we've already got these plans developed, we can get real clear pricing on equipment. Equipment being cooking equipment, ventilation, food service ventilation, all the refrigeration, storage shelving. We can also provide, um, casework, millwork, seating, tables, finishes if necessary. Um, so that once that process is completed, once you've decided um, on the equipment, you've decided this is what you're going to spend on the equipment, this is what you're going to spend on the build out, based on the architectural plans that should be during the bidding, had gone through the bidding process. If you decide to go the bidding process, or if you already have a contractor that you're working with and are comfortable with, then you kind of skip that process, because you trust them and you can get a real number real quick. Um, so once all the numbers are together, you submit to the city for their permits, and then you get the project started. You start building, and it's a long process because there's a lot of trades, a real lot of trades involved in a restaurant that you wouldn't have in like an office building where there's just receptacles for power and data. Where in a restaurant, a third of your construction budget is going to be electrical work, a third of it's going to be plumbing and HVAC, and then the other third is going to be, the finish and build out. So I mean, there's a lot of different utilities and trades that go into it. So
Hmm.
it's going to take some time too.
That's why I think working with someone like you is good because you're more familiar with what it takes and with the local municipalities, so you can kind of guide the restaurant owner through that process so they know, hey, this one's only going to take a week, but this one might take 3 weeks. So we need to get on this now. So I think that knowledge is more of what one of your customers is paying for than the actual service that you're providing because that knowledge is a lot more valuable. So
Well, absolutely. We've done, I mean, we've done work all over the country. We understand all the health departments. Lucky for us, one of the most difficult is here locally. So we just, it's our standard to design, to a tough, guideline. And that's just kind of what we've done. So
okay,
our goal is always to go into this without having any concerns from the health department. And that's, we've always come out on the good end of that goal. It's never been an issue.
that's
So we've
great.
always been good with the health department.
We've kind of breezed over, when to get you involved a little bit. And one thing that you had said earlier that I wanted to expand on was um, that working with the right consultant is very important to your project. And I think you gave us an example before when we were speaking of not letting that design consultant take over and do their own kind of project, what they feel it's supposed to be, but actually taking your project and making it the best it can be. And you gave me an example before about a pizza oven and whether or not you want to cook in front of the audience, so to speak, or if you want to have it hidden behind the walls. So tell me a little bit about that and how that layout makes a difference and how you guys are different as far as doing that for your customers.
Well, I mean, client communication is always key to a successful project, um, and this is something that you'll learn early on in the process. If you decide to have pizzas on your menu, for example, um, there are different ways to deliver a pizza. Whether it's just back of the house, you make a pizza in a deck oven and it's not visible to the customer, or if it's something that you want to be a integral part of the entire built environment that you're creating. Is it a specialty pizza and will you get to see the person making the pizza, flinging it up in the air and then putting it in a real kind of cool specialty oven? That could be something that
Part of the
is part of
experience.
the whole process and the whole experience. Um, but it's something that we would ask if that was a menu item that we see work in different aspects. Then we'll ask those questions. It's the same with whether people like open concept kitchens. Do they want the customers to be able to see in the kitchen and see everything going on? In some places, that's their aesthetic. That's what they're going for. They want this whole place to feel like like you're at home and you're just, cooking and everybody's around and it's an open kitchen. Everybody can see what's going on. And, but obviously something like that takes more planning because now you need to focus that seating around the kitchen and make sure that you have some tasks that maybe aren't so sightly, such as, like dishwashing and cleanup,
Yeah,
that those aren't visible to the customer because they're really noisy operations too. So yeah, that's we're really good at being on top of asking the right questions and making sure the clients being heard too. What they want to see in the restaurant, how that affects some of the visual stuff, and how it affects the equipment too.
yeah. I think sometimes the new restaurant owner doesn't know what questions are needing to be asked. So I think it's important to work with someone who's experienced. Budget we kind of skipped over a little bit too, and just if you could sum up for me two different kind of options. One would be like a what would an expected budget be for a standard build out, like if they're renting a space, and the other one would be a budget for your services if they were kind of starting from scratch and actually had to build their own building.
Ooh, that's a big, wide range of numbers there.
Yeah, I think you said it more in percentages when we talked before,
Yes,
or even a
I'm
dollar
just
per
kind of
square
looking
foot.
back to some of the projects that I've worked on here, and I've been in the process early on where I've even before the client had the space, they were looking for spaces and brought me in, basically, on an architecture standpoint. Um, but I was also I'm also a food service consultant, so it's good to have that combination there to research sites. So I did go to on one project in particular, went to several different spaces, you know, to see if this one would work for them and based on their budget. Um, the example was one we went into a hair salon, so it wasn't an existing restaurant. It was a hair salon, so there's a lot of work that would need to be done. We kind of broke down what equipment costs would be for that small space, and this was just a small bakery, so it wasn't a big production kitchen, just a small prep area, some cooking. Um, we ended up finding another space that was already a restaurant. Um, Although the lease rate for the space was more expensive, the overall construction budget was, cut in about a quarter of the whole project. So finding space that's kind of already a restaurant space is going to be a lot less expensive than building it from scratch or going into a tenant space that is not a restaurant. Maybe it was an office or something else. Because, like I said earlier, there's a significant amount of work involved in mechanical, electrical, plumbing, utilities.
Yeah.
Um, putting a number on it is kind of difficult. I mean, there's a lot of sources online through RS Means or something like that to put a cost per square foot for a new build out or a tenant improvement. Um, New construction is a little easier to gauge in terms of using a cost per square foot number. And a quick internet search will, like cost per square foot for a place in Michigan or, Indiana or whatever state or municipality. Um, New construction could be $100 to $200 a square foot, and that's going to be just for the build out of the space. Um, you know, the food service equipment will, it's hard to put a cost per square foot for that. Um,
That you can work that out with the customer specifically for their project.
yeah, I mean, there's, it really depends on the menu. How much specific things need to be based on the menu, how much equipment's going to be required, and also the size of the restaurant. Obviously, it's going to require a bigger restaurant's going to require bigger walk-in coolers and walk-in freezers and more dry storage. Um, cost per square foot for the equipment itself is you can't really use any of the stuff you're going to see online in terms of that. But it's going to range between for brand new equipment, from a small cafe of maybe 30,000 for equipment to um, a full service restaurant, breakfast, lunch, dinner, or even lunch, dinner. Um, this, that could cost $200,000 for equipment. So there's a huge range. Um, Now, in terms of assigning, kind of getting a budget idea for um, fees for what you're going to see from an architect or a food service design consultant. Um, Generally, there is the guideline that whatever you spend on the building, an architect's fee is generally 6%. Although with the economy the way it's been, it's closer to 5% of the total construction cost.
Okay.
Um, I I don't recall ever charging that much. It's really based on a per project. Mine usually equal out about 3 to 4%, but bigger firms, with big overhead and stuff, would charge 5, 6% on projects. Food service design, it's another wide range, but generally a smaller cafe or ice cream shop would be, probably about $1,000 for a um, food service design fee, which would be the whole, food service design set, you
Hmm.
know, specs, all that stuff, to, potentially, $4,000 for a full service restaurant. That would be the food service design fee or something like that. Generally, food design companies will work with you to, if you decide to buy the equipment with them, they will kind of credit you some of that design fee. So there's some benefit to working with that person and purchasing equipment from them too. So that's kind of the breakdown of some costs, I guess, as much as I could break it down.
It's a very vague number. Um, well, you've given us a ton of information. I mean, we've talked about, what a food service consultant does, who they are, what they are, why a new restaurant owner would need one, and what they would, the questions they would need to ask. And I think you've given us a lot of information where I think for the people listening, they're going to have more questions now that they've listened, because there's a lot more that I think most people didn't realize when they're going into it. So I've got your information up on the screen, and I'm just going to make sure for anyone who's listening, I can't see the screen. I'm going to read it out. You're Matt Badrock, and your phone number is 313-343-0597. I'm going to give the short email address, matt at ct-design.com. And what would you say is the best way for someone to contact you if they want to get some more information?
Phone or email, I can answer either way.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect. All right. Well, I certainly appreciate the time. And if anybody has any questions, please get a hold of Matt, and you can always get a hold of us for more information as well. We're at the restaurantbusinessadvisors.com. Thanks again, Matt.
All right, thanks, Jared.